The Galactic Council had ruled over the stars for centuries, their power unquestioned, their decisions final. From their floating citadels in the heart of the galaxy, they governed with cold, logical precision, maintaining a balance between the hundreds of species that shared the universe. To them, peace was not just a goal, it was a product of careful, calculated control. For years, humanity, Earthborns as they were known, had been a curiosity. Primitive, volatile, and far too young to understand the delicate web that the Council had built, they were relegated to the fringe of galactic society. Earth had managed to make its mark, expanding across the stars, building colonies and forging alliances, but they were never allowed to sit at the same table as the great empires. But the Council had always watched, always calculated, and now, as the human colonies grew rapidly, something shifted. Fear began to rise within the Council, quiet but insistent, fear of what humanity might become, fear of what they could do when they had more power, more technology, more influence. The Earthborns weren't weak, they were dangerous, and so the decision was made. It was a quiet afternoon when the vote was called. The Council's great chamber, vast and cold, echoed with the murmurs of tension. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their seats, their faces serious, their eyes wary. The decision they would make today was no small matter. The fate of Earthborns was in their hands. Chancellor Zorn of the Zenter Dominion spoke first, his voice smooth but sharp. The Earthborns are a threat to our peace. They lack the wisdom, the patience, the control necessary to coexist with the Council's ideals. We cannot allow them to become a power in the galaxy. There were murmurs of agreement, nods, and solemn expressions. It wasn't a matter of diplomacy anymore. It was a matter of survival, or so they believed. Their expansion is unchecked, said the representative from the Ilinari Republic. Their technology is advancing faster than even our own. They will overrun us if they're not stopped. A slight hum of agreement passed through the room, and the tension thickened. You're all missing the point, said Admiral Keth of the Threx Dominion, his voice like gravel. The Earthborns don't know how to keep their own balance. They don't have the experience. They don't have the restraint. He paused, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the large holographic display in front of him. It showed the Earth's rapidly expanding reach across the stars, blinking like a threat in the vastness of space. The time has come. We vote to ban Earthborns from full membership. They will no longer have access to the central systems. They will not join our alliance. They will not join the Council. The room fell into an uneasy silence. The gravity of the decision settled over them like a cloud. But the decision had already been made. The vote was a mere formality. On Earth, the news came swiftly. The United Earth government received word of the Council's vote, and the reaction was immediate. News networks buzzed with anger, confusion, and a quiet, building rage. Earth's diplomats, who had fought tirelessly for a place among the stars, felt the sting of rejection. Humanity had been denied not by force, but by cold, indifferent politics. President Mara Liu stood in front of her people, her face set with determination. Behind her, images of the stars, bright and full of hope, flashed across screens, her hands clenched. We've come so far, we've built relationships, we've expanded our colonies, we've brought technology to the stars. And now we are told we are not good enough, that we are a threat to the peace of the galaxy. This is not just a blow to our government. This is a blow to every human being who believed that we were equal in the eyes of the galaxy. The camera zoomed in on her face as she took a deep breath. We will not bend, we will not be silenced. If they think they can ban us, they are mistaken. Across the galaxy, there was disbelief. Many species thought it was a mistake, a temporary act of anger from the Council. The humans, young and brash, would eventually learn their place, they thought. The Council had done what was necessary to keep balance. And yet, as the days passed, a growing sense of unease began to settle over the Council itself. The Earthborns had been underestimated. In the heart of the Council chamber, the decision was final. The vote had been cast, and the law was clear. Earthborns were not to be granted the rights of full membership. Their colonies would remain isolated, their trade routes monitored. The Council had spoken, and the future was decided. But there was something the Council had not counted on, the resilience of humanity. The night the vote passed, the lights in the Council chamber flickered. At first, no one thought much of it, but then the lights went out completely. The vast chamber was plunged into complete darkness. Gasps of confusion filled the air. The hum of the great machinery that powered the chamber fell silent. For a moment, no one moved. And then from the silence, a voice echoed, cold, calm, and unmistakably human. Too late. The voice carried through the chamber, sending shivers down the spines of the council members. It was not loud, not a shout, but there was something in its quiet certainty that made their blood run cold. The lights flickered again, and when they returned, the room was different. Holographic screens flashed to life across the chamber, displaying images of Earth, not just Earth, but the entire Sol system. And surrounding it, like an invisible wall, were the ships of Earth's fleet, tens of thousands of them, hidden in plain sight. Weapons of unimaginable power, each one capable of crippling the Council's defenses in a heartbeat. They had been there all along, just waiting for the Council to make its move. One simple phrase appeared on every screen, in bold letters that seemed to pulse with finality. Too late. The Council sat in stunned silence. This was no bluff, no trick. Humanity had known, and now they were no longer the weak, untested species the Council had dismissed. They were a force, and they had just declared that they would not be dismissed. The vote to ban Earthborns was not just a decision to restrict them. It had been a declaration of war, and humanity, for all their flaws, had just proven that they would fight. And in that silence, in the quiet after the lights went out, the galaxy knew. The balance of power was about to shift. The galaxy held its breath as the Council's decision reverberated across the stars. The vote to ban Earthborns had been final. The Council, secure in its power, felt no need to fear a race that had barely emerged from their homeworld. Humans, they believed, were a young species, brash, emotional, and easily contained. But in that same moment, far away on Earth, something began to change. Earth had always been resilient. It had survived wars, climate disasters, and conflict that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. Humanity had learned to fight not just with weapons, but with their hearts, with their minds, and with an unyielding spirit that refused to be broken. The vote to ban Earthborns from full membership in the Galactic Council had been a spark. The flames it ignited would change everything. President Mara Liu stood before a gathering of Earth's highest military commanders, political leaders, and scientists. The room was tense, the air thick with a quiet fury that even the most seasoned diplomats couldn't ignore. The Council's decision had been swift, but Earth was anything but defeated. President Liu, General Ria Santiago said, stepping forward, "We have everything we need. The fleet is ready to move, the technology is in place. All we need is your order." Mara looked out the large window, where the stars twinkled in the distance. The Earthborns had always looked to the stars with wonder. But now, the wonder was gone. Now they were looking at those stars with a determination to claim them. She turned back to face the gathered assembly, her expression hardening. "We are not going to beg them for a seat at their table," she said firmly. "We are going to take it." The room erupted into applause. The humans, once underestimated, now had a singular purpose: to show the galaxy that they were not a species to be cast aside. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Council's victory celebration had begun. They were already beginning to pat themselves on the back, secure in the belief that they had quelled the Earthborn problem. The humans would learn their place. The vote had ensured that Earth would remain a secondary power, weak, insignificant, no longer a threat to the status quo. At that very moment, however, the Council's network began to flicker. Systems malfunctioned. The lights in the Council chamber dimmed, then went out completely. "Why is the system failing?" someone asked in confusion. The monitors turned on, one by one, but not to show the images they expected. Instead, the screen flashed with an image of the Earth, the planet's blue oceans and green landmasses glowing brightly against the dark backdrop of space. But then, the camera zoomed out, revealing something that sent a chill through every member of the Council. Around Earth's orbit, invisible to the Council's sensors, ships appeared. Not a few, not just one or two, but entire fleets, massive and glowing with power. Humanity's hidden armada, crafted in secret over years, surrounded the planet like an iron wall. There were hundreds of ships, and each one was capable of overwhelming the defenses of any species in the galaxy. A voice, calm and resolute, echoed through the chamber. It wasn't a broadcast, it wasn't a transmission, it was everywhere. "Too late," the voice said. The Council froze. Fear spread like wildfire through the ranks. They had been watching Earth's rapid expansion, but they hadn't known just how far humanity had gone. They had misjudged their power, their resolve. On Earth, as the fleet stood poised to move, President Liu watched the live feed. It wasn't a war yet, but it could be. They hadn't fired a single shot, hadn't yet crossed the line into open conflict. They were making a statement. They were showing the galaxy that they would no longer be passive. We've done everything to this point without firing a weapon, Mara said quietly to her commanders. Let's remind them that we don't need to start with violence. We just need to show them that we are not afraid to stand up. General Santiago nodded. We've always fought with our minds and our will, not just our weapons, but if they push us, we will be ready. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. The council scrambled to find a way to respond, but they had never imagined something like this. Their fleets were scattered, their power diluted by their overconfidence. Earth's ships didn't even have to fire their weapons. The mere presence of humanity's might was enough to rattle the foundations of the council's authority. Humanity had become a force in the galaxy, one that was unwilling to be controlled, one that would not let its voice be silenced. But there was one thing the Earthborns had not expected. Not all council members were willing to go down without a fight. A faction led by Admiral Krell of the Threx Dominion began plotting their counterattack. The Earthborns were a threat, and the Threx had long viewed them as a wild animal that needed to be tamed. We cannot let them rise unchecked, Admiral Krell declared in a private meeting with the council. If we wait too long, they will destroy us. The other factions nodded, though reluctantly. They didn't understand Earth, didn't understand humanity, but they knew they couldn't afford to underestimate them any longer. As the Council's fleets prepared to move against Earth, the Earthborns were ready. In the shadows of their fleets, beneath the outer rims of their colonies, humanity's finest minds had been working. They had created weapons that were unlike anything the Council had ever seen, but they had also built something far more powerful: unity. Across the galaxy, people had started to see humanity in a new light. No longer were Earthborns viewed as naive children of the stars. They were a force to be reckoned with. On Earth, the Earthborns stood ready. The fleet was mobilized, but there was no rush to action. There was no desperation in their eyes. There was only the quiet, unshakable confidence of those who had nothing left to lose. As the Council fleet prepared for the final jump toward Earth, they suddenly received a new transmission. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a negotiation. It was simple, direct, and impossible to ignore. The transmission was from Earth. You wanted us to kneel. We will not. Then the transmission ended. No more words, no more requests, just a statement, a challenge. The Council had thought they were in control, but the lights had gone out, and the galaxy had learned one undeniable truth. Humanity was no longer just a part of the galaxy. Humanity was going to change it. The galaxy held its breath. The Council had made its move, and humanity had answered in kind. The tension between Earth and the galaxy had reached a breaking point, and now neither side knew what the next moment would bring. The Earthborns were ready. The fleets, hidden for years in the cold reaches of space, had fully assembled and now hovered in silent formation around Earth. Thousands of ships, warships, transports, and long-range cruisers waited, their engines primed, their weapons at the ready. But the greatest weapon humanity had was not in its ships or its technology. It was in their unity. On Earth, President Mara Liu stood before a large digital map of the galaxy, surrounded by her trusted advisors. The room was quiet, filled with a palpable sense of purpose. The weight of the decision they had made to go head-to-head with the most powerful council in the galaxy was not lost on anyone. We can't go back now, Mara said quietly, her fingers brushing across the surface of the holographic display, tracing the lines between Earth and the Council's territories. But I refuse to sit by and watch us be cast aside. This is our time to show them that humanity will not be a footnote in their history. General Ria Santiago, standing beside her, nodded. We've prepared for this moment. Every soldier, every fleet commander, every scientist has worked to make this possible. The Earthborns may be new to the stars, but we're not new to survival. Myra looked up, her face hard with resolve. We're not just fighting for our place in this galaxy. We're fighting for our future. We'll make them see what happens when you push humanity too far. Meanwhile, aboard one of the largest human warships, the Vigilance, Commander Elias Gray stood at the helm, watching as the Earth fleet formed up, ready to move. Elias had been a soldier long before he was a leader, and he had seen what war did to worlds. Yet there was no hesitation in his gaze. The Council had shown their hand, and now it was time to act. The Council will underestimate us, he said, his voice calm, steady as he addressed his crew. They think we'll fold, they think we'll back down. He turned, his eyes meeting each one of his officers. But we are human, and we don't know how to quit. The crew nodded, an unspoken bond between them. They were not just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for every colony, every family, every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of more. The Council's response was swift. As soon as the Earthborn fleets were detected in deep space, the Council began to mobilize. Massive warships, once thought to be untouchable, began to power up their engines. The galaxy's most advanced fleets, the Zarkin, the Threx, and the Cathari, all began to move toward the Sol system. Chancellor Zorn stood at the heart of the Council's war room, his face grim. He had once dismissed the humans as a fleeting problem. Now they were a storm on the horizon, and there was no avoiding them. "We underestimated them," Zorn said through clenched teeth. "The Earthborns have proven that they won't be controlled. We must act quickly. If we don't stop them now, they will tear apart everything we've built." Admiral Krell of the Threx Dominion stepped forward, his face cold and calculating. "Our fleets are ready. We'll crush them before they even leave their home system." Zorn's gaze hardened. "No, we strike before they can mobilize fully. We will show them that the galaxy is not a playground for their reckless ambition." But deep down, Zorn knew the truth. The humans weren't playing by the same rules. They had already proven that. The first clash came faster than anyone expected. The Earthborns didn't wait for the Council to initiate the attack. Instead, they made the first move. With coordinated precision, human warships crossed into the heart of Council space, their engines humming like a heartbeat. They were fast, and they were relentless. The Council's fleets, accustomed to overwhelming force and slow engagements, were caught off guard. Admiral Krell's flagship, the Imperial Fury, was one of the first to engage. The Zarkin warships followed, but the humans were already in motion, their ships darting through the chaos. The humans were unpredictable, their movements erratic and wild, and that made them deadly. The Council fleets, despite their superior numbers, were struggling to keep up. On Earth's side, the Vigilance led the charge, its engines screaming as it sliced through the darkness of space. The massive ship unleashed a torrent of fire, its railguns tearing through enemy shields. It was a force of nature, and it had only just begun. "This is it," Elias said, watching the monitors. "We've come this far, there's no turning back now. We fight until we win." And so they did. As the battle raged in the depths of space, President Liu sat in her command center, watching the live feed. The first skirmish was nothing short of brutal, but the humans were holding their own. Despite the odds, despite the overwhelming strength of the Council, humanity was showing the galaxy just how far they had come. "They're scared," one of her advisors said, watching the Council fleet struggle. "They didn't expect us to fight like this." Myra's eyes were cold, her resolve absolute. "It's not just about fighting anymore. It's about showing them that we will never back down. They wanted to push us away. Now they're going to see why that was their greatest mistake." On the front lines, the Earthborns fought with a passion that burned through the cold of space. Their ships, now fully engaged, moved with terrifying efficiency. Every shot fired, every maneuver executed showed the galaxy one thing: humanity was not just a species that survived. It was a species that thrived under pressure. As the battle wore on, the Council's forces began to falter. Despite their superior firepower, the unpredictability of the Earthborns caught them off guard time and time again. Every time they thought they had the upper hand, humanity would find a way to strike back. Admiral Krell, his face filled with frustration, barked orders to his officers. "We cannot let them win. This is not just a war. This is our future." On Earth, the lights flickered as another transmission came through. This time, it was from the Council. Their message was simple, but their desperation was clear. "We offer a ceasefire. We will negotiate a treaty. Earthborns may join the Council under one condition." The message cut off. No more words, just a flashing red warning, and the reply from Earth. "We didn't come to negotiate. We came to take what's ours." The lights in the Council chamber flickered again, but this time they did not go out. They flickered with uncertainty. Humanity was not backing down. The storm was rising, and the galaxy had underestimated its fury. The storm was just beginning. The Council had never faced an enemy like humanity. The galaxy's oldest and most powerful factions had clashed countless times, but never with a species so unpredictable, so relentless. The Earthborns weren't just fighting for their place in the galaxy. They were fighting for something deeper, something the Council couldn't understand: their right to exist on their own terms. It was not just a war of weapons, it was a war of will. The battle had already stretched on for hours. Earth's fleet, once thought to be an afterthought, had proven to be a terrifying force, moving with terrifying precision. The Council's fleets, huge, massive, and powerful, were struggling to keep up with the Earthborns' speed and ferocity. The humans didn't fight the way the Council's fleets had trained for. They didn't follow the old rules. They didn't follow any rules. General Ria Santiago, the commander of Earth's military forces, watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Vigilance. Her hands clenched the armrests of her command chair as explosions lit up the dark expanse of space. The Council ships were scattered, some attempting to regroup while others were already retreating. "We've pushed them back," she said quietly. But she knew this wasn't over. The Council had vast reserves, reinforcements, resources, and fleets they hadn't deployed yet. They wouldn't give up so easily. "We haven't won yet," General Santiago added, her voice steady but grim. "Not by a long shot." Across the galaxy, the news spread. The Earthborns weren't just fighting. They were winning. On worlds once dominated by the Council, people began to rise. Resistance movements flared in every corner of the galaxy, from the icy wastes of the Cathari homeworlds to the dense jungles of the Silac. There were whispers in the streets, in the bars, in the halls of government. Humanity had proven it wasn't just a survivor. It was a force to be reckoned with. President Mara Liu stood before a holographic display in the Earth Defense Command, her expression hard. "The Council thought they could control us," she said to her advisors. "They thought we were too weak to challenge them, but now they're seeing the truth." She turned away from the display, looking out at the stars. "We've shown them what happens when they underestimate us, but this is only the beginning." Her voice was quiet, but everyone in the room felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just a fight for Earth. It was a fight for the future. Back in the Council chambers, Chancellor Zorn paced angrily. The Council had fought for their peace for centuries, had maintained their control through power and diplomacy. Yet here was a species, no older than a few hundred years, that had threatened to shatter their carefully built empire. "We cannot allow this to continue," Zorn said, his voice edged with panic. "Earthborns cannot be allowed to take control of the galaxy." Admiral Krell of the Threx Dominion, always the fiercest advocate for war, nodded. "We will not stop until they are crushed. Prepare the reinforcements." But there was hesitation now, something Zorn had never seen in the eyes of his fellow Council members. The tide had shifted, and they all knew it. "The Earthborns are not like us," one of the Silac advisors said, his voice filled with fear. "They have no honor, no restraint. They will stop at nothing to get what they want." Krell's expression darkened. "Then we give them what they want, all-out war." Back on Earth, the human fleet had grown stronger with every passing hour. New ships, previously hidden, now joined the fight. The world had mobilized completely, pushing every resource into the war effort. But even as the fleet moved to engage the Council's forces, a deeper question lingered. What would the cost be? Commander Elias Gray, a decorated war hero who had fought in some of humanity's deadliest campaigns, stood on the bridge of the Vigilance, watching the battle unfold. His mind wasn't on tactics. His mind was on the people, the ones who had been affected by the Council's decision, the families torn apart by the thought of being cast aside. "We're winning," Ria said, her eyes locked on the view of the battle outside. "But what if we're winning the wrong way? What happens when we're done?" Elias paused. He had fought in countless wars, survived atrocities that would break lesser men. But this was different. This was not just about survival. It was about what came after. "We do what we have to do," Elias said, his voice cold but his eyes softening with an unspoken weight. "But we remember who we are, who we want to be when this is all over." Ria turned to him, a single question in her gaze. "And who is that, Commander?" Elias' lips curved into a faint smile. "The ones who fought for a better future, not just for themselves. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want our place in it." The next few days brought more chaos. The Earthborn fleet was relentless. Council reinforcements arrived, but their response was disorganized. The once feared Zarkan and Cathari warships were now caught off guard, struggling to adapt to the ferocity of humanity's new tactics. The Council's arrogance was being shattered piece by Earth's overwhelming resolve. Despite the victories, the cost began to show. Earth's fleet was damaged, its ships battered. The Council's forces were relentless, and every victory came with a price. Ships were lost, soldiers were fallen, and the war was taking its toll on both sides. On Earth, Mara Liu paced in her command center. The weight of leadership bore down on her more with each passing moment. Every decision now seemed to carry the potential for disaster. She turned to her advisors. How many more can we lose before it's too late? The room fell into a heavy silence. No one had an answer. They were all painfully aware of the truth. Every victory was pushing them closer to the brink. In the depths of space, far from the battlefield, the Earthborn fleet moved forward. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting to prove that the galaxy's laws were not theirs to follow. They were fighting to rewrite those laws, to show that humanity had a place among the stars, not as a subject, not as a lesser power, but as equals. And though the price of defiance was high, humanity would not bend, not this time. The war raged on, but one thing was clear. The Council had underestimated the Earthborns. They had thought that humanity would bend to their will. Instead, humanity had stood tall, and in doing so had sparked a revolution. The war had reached a breaking point. What had started as a battle for equality had turned into a full-scale conflict that threatened to tear apart the fabric of the galaxy. The Earthborns, once dismissed as a nuisance, had shown the Council the true meaning of defiance. And now, both sides stood at the precipice of something no one could control. The Council's fleets had been decimated. Their reinforcements, once thought to be their greatest strength, were scattered and disoriented. And humanity was not backing down. The human fleet, though battered, was still a force to be reckoned with. They were tired, but their resolve was stronger than ever. The decision to fight for their place in the galaxy had been made, and now they would see it through, no matter the cost. The vast emptiness of space stretched before them. In the middle of the battlefield, amidst the wreckage of broken warships and burning debris, Earth's flagship, the Vigilance, stood firm, its engines glowing brightly as it prepared for what was to come. The final battle. It would either secure their future or break them forever. President Myra Liu stood before a holographic map, surrounded by the brightest minds humanity had to offer. The fight was far from over, but she knew that this moment would define the destiny of her people. "They won't stop," she said quietly, her voice steady but filled with the weight of everything they had fought for. "The Council will keep throwing everything they have at us until we break, but we can't afford to break, not now." General Ria Santiago stood at attention, her gaze locked on the map. "We don't need to win by their rules. We just need to make sure they know we'll never stop fighting." Mara nodded, a fierce determination in her eyes. "Exactly. We're not going to wait for their mercy. We're going to make them realize that they don't control the galaxy anymore. We do." The room fell silent as the full weight of her words settled in. This wasn't just about war. It was about humanity's place in the stars. The Council had underestimated them, but they had not yet understood the depth of their resolve. Humanity was not asking for a seat at the table. They were taking it. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Commander Elias Gray watched as his fleet prepared for the final assault. His face was tired, his eyes worn with the weight of the battles he had fought, but there was no fear in him. The Earthborns had come so far, and no matter what happened now, they would prove that they belonged among the stars. "Commanders ready, sir," his communications officer said, her voice firm despite the tension in the air. "All ships in position, we're good to go." Elias nodded, his mind focused. He had been a soldier long before he had become a symbol of humanity's fight. But this battle, unlike any before, carried more weight. It wasn't just about victory or defeat. It was about the future, about showing the galaxy that humanity could rise from the ashes and take its place beside the oldest empires. "We fight for Earth. We fight for every man, woman, and child who believed that we could be more than the sum of our flaws," Elias said to his crew, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "This isn't just a fight for survival. This is a fight for our legacy. We end this war today." The crew cheered, their resolve hardening with every word. They had no illusions of how this would end. The Council would not surrender easily, but neither would they. The Council, on the other hand, was frantically preparing for what they knew was coming. Their forces, though vastly outnumbering the Earthborns, were stretched thin, desperate to make a final stand. Admiral Krell, the Threxian strategist, stood before the holographic display of the battlefield, his face lined with stress and fury. "We cannot let them win," Krell said, slamming his fist onto the table. "They are not a threat we can simply ignore. They're a force that will tear apart everything we've built if we don't stop them here." Chancellor Zorn stood by the table, looking out at the chaos unfolding in the depths of space. He had spent his entire life maintaining control, upholding the structure of the galaxy, and now it seemed to be slipping away. "We fight to preserve the peace," Zorn said quietly, though there was little conviction in his voice. "But we must do what is necessary, no matter the cost." In the final moments before the battle began, the Earthborns made one last broadcast to the galaxy. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was a simple message, a statement of intent. "We didn't start this war, but we will end it. Today we show the galaxy that Earth is not a place for the weak. We are not here to beg, we are here to take what is ours." The message was received across the galaxy, and in every corner of the universe, from the farthest colonies to the most ancient empires, people watched and listened. It was no longer just Earth's fight. It was the fight of every species that had ever been pushed aside, every world that had been told it didn't matter, every voice that had been silenced. Humanity was speaking for them all. The final battle began in a flash. The Earthborns launched their assault with everything they had, their weapons tearing into the heart of the Council's forces. But this time, it wasn't just the firepower of their fleet that made the difference. It was their hearts, their resolve. The Council fleets, once mighty, began to crumble. Their ships were strong, but they were slow, and they were not ready for the swiftness of humanity's strikes. Earth's fleet moved like a storm, unpredictable and overwhelming. They took advantage of every weakness, striking when the Council least expected it. Admiral Krell barked orders, but even his seasoned tactics could not keep the Earthborns at bay. The fight had escalated to a point where there was no turning back. "We will not lose," Krell shouted, even as his ship was struck by Earthborn fire. But the truth was clear to all. The Earthborns were not just surviving, they were conquering. As the Council's defenses crumbled, President Liu watched from Earth's command center, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment they had all been fighting for. Her people had given everything, and now the galaxy would know what humanity was capable of. In the distance, Earth's fleet tore through the final lines of the Council's forces, and the galaxy began to understand. Earth was no longer a fringe world, a small and irrelevant player. Earth was here, and it was here to stay. The final blow came when the Vigilance made its move. With a single strike, it disabled the Council's main flagship, sending a shockwave through the remaining fleets. The battle was over. The Earthborns had won. But as the war ended, one truth remained. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. No longer would they be seen as weak or irrelevant. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars. And the Council, they would never underestimate Earthborns again. This battle was only the beginning. The galaxy would never be the same again. The final victory was harder to celebrate than anyone expected. The Earthborns had won the battle, crushed the Council's fleets, and secured their place in the galaxy. But the cost had been great. Cities on Earth were still rebuilding, and countless lives had been lost in the war that had taken the galaxy by storm. The Earthborns had fought for their future, but now they had to figure out what that future looked like. President Mara Liu stood on a balcony in the New Earth Command Center, looking out over the world she had worked so hard to protect. The planet was alive with activity, construction projects, political reforms, military mobilizations. It was a time of change, and though the scars of war were still fresh, humanity was rising from them with determination. The stars were still out there, the endless black void of space, full of unknowns and dangers. But now, humanity wasn't just watching from the sidelines. They were part of it as equals. "We did it," she said quietly to herself, the weight of it all sinking in. "But now we rebuild." Beside her, General Ria Santiago stood, her eyes scanning the horizon, her mind still sharp despite the exhaustion that lined her face. "We fought for this moment, Mara," she said, her voice low but resolute. "Now it's time to make sure we don't squander it." Mara nodded slowly. "We've shown the galaxy our strength. Now we show them our heart, but it won't be easy. The Council might be gone, but there are still plenty of powers who won't forgive us for what we've done." The Earthborns had not only shattered the Council's rule, but also fractured the old power structures of the galaxy. Once the war had ended, a strange, almost uneasy peace settled in. The galaxy was no longer the same, it was different, and humanity stood at the center of it all, ready to shape the future. On Earth, the leadership began to reorganize. No longer was it simply about survival, now it was about the vision they had fought for. How would they govern? What role would Earth play in the newly shifting political landscape? The next few weeks were filled with diplomacy, strategy, and hard choices. Leaders from across the galaxy reached out, unsure how to approach this new reality. The Council was gone, its power shattered, but new alliances were already beginning to form. "We need to show them that we're more than just warriors," Mara said, meeting with her advisors. "We need to show them we can lead, build, and protect, not just for ourselves, but for the entire galaxy." Her voice was calm but filled with an unwavering determination. "This isn't just about us. It's about the future of every species that stood by and watched us fight. They need to see that we're not here to conquer, we're here to offer a partnership." The first test came sooner than expected. A group of Cathari diplomats arrived at Earth's capital, bringing an offer of cooperation. The Cathari were one of the most ancient and powerful species in the galaxy, and their presence here was a sign that the tides were shifting. They had watched humanity's rise with both fear and awe. "We've heard the stories," said Kairalth, the Cathari ambassador. "Your people have proven themselves in ways that many of us could never have imagined. We have seen your strength, but now we need to see your wisdom." Mara looked him in the eye. "I can promise you this," she said. "We will not lead with fear, we will lead with unity. Humanity may be young in the galaxy, but we have learned to survive, to grow, and to stand with others." The Cathari ambassador was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing her words. Finally, he spoke. "Then let us see if the Earthborns truly have the heart you claim. We offer peace, and in return we ask for your trust." Mara extended her hand. "You have it." It was a small step, but it was a sign that humanity wasn't alone anymore. Earth was no longer an outsider. They were part of the galaxy now, and the galaxy was willing to listen. Elsewhere, tensions still simmered. Some factions within the galaxy still viewed Earth with distrust. The Illinari, an ancient species known for their academic superiority, were the next to test humanity. They questioned whether humanity had the diplomatic finesse to coexist with the more established galactic powers. An Illinari delegation arrived at Earth, prepared to scrutinize every detail of the Earthborns' newfound power. They questioned the motives behind Earth's military mobilization, the speed at which their fleets had been constructed, and whether their sudden rise signaled a thirst for domination. For the first time, President Mara Liu felt the weight of the responsibility she had been carrying. She wasn't just leading a species, she was leading a movement. She wasn't just answering to her people, she was now speaking for all of humanity. The world watched as she stood before the Illinari delegation, calm but unflinching. "You think we've risen too quickly," she said, her voice steady. "But we've been preparing for this moment for centuries. You didn't see it because you were too busy dismissing us. You thought we didn't belong here." She took a breath. "But we do belong here, we've earned our place, and we'll work with you not as rivals but as partners." The Illinari didn't speak immediately, but when they did, it was with a note of respect. "Perhaps we've underestimated you, Earthborns. Perhaps there is more to your strength than just brute force." Months passed, and Earth slowly but surely began to rebuild its relations with other species. New alliances were formed, and old hostilities began to fade. Earth wasn't just a power. It was a bridge between the old powers of the galaxy and the younger, more unpredictable species. Humanity had proven itself a force of nature, yes, but it had also shown a side the galaxy had not expected, the capacity to heal, to work together, and to grow beyond the mistakes of the past. President Liu, standing once more on her balcony overlooking the city, knew the war was not the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter for humanity and the galaxy, a chapter that would be written by the hands of those who refused to be held back. As she looked up at the stars, a soft smile crossed her face. The future, though uncertain, was bright. Humanity had proven its worth, and now it was ready to shape the stars. The galaxy was changing. The old order had crumbled under the weight of humanity's defiance. The Earthborns had fought for their place, bled for it, and now they stood at the center of a new era. The battle for equality had been brutal, but it had forged something stronger than ever before. A united front, a new vision for the future. And Earth, now at the heart of it all, was ready to lead. President Mara Liu stood in the new capital, Earth's shining city at the crossroads of the galaxy. She had seen the horrors of war, felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders, but now, looking out at the world she had fought to protect, she could feel hope returning. The scars of battle would never fade, but humanity had proven something important, that they would not only survive but thrive. The war with the Council had not only reshaped Earth's future, it had reshaped the entire galaxy. Once, humanity had been seen as a threat. Now the galaxy saw them as a powerful force, but also as potential allies, builders, and leaders. Myra turned to her trusted advisor, General Ria Santiago, who stood beside her, eyes fixed on the bustling city below. "How long before the next challenge comes?" Myra asked quietly. "Too soon to tell," Ria replied. "But we're ready. We've proven we can fight. Now we need to show the galaxy we can lead." A few weeks after the war, the Council had been dissolved, and its powers redistributed among a new coalition of species. The counselors, those who once held dominion over the galaxy, had been forced into uneasy retreat. No one, least of all the Elanari or the Zarkin, expected the Earthborns to take the mantle of leadership. Yet humanity had shown that they could build something different, something stronger, a future that was not dictated by fear, but by choice and resilience. The galaxy had no choice but to listen. Humanity had earned their place, not through diplomacy or political maneuvering, but through sheer determination. Mara stood before the gathered delegates of the new Galactic Union. This was the first assembly of the most diverse coalition in history, and the weight of this moment was not lost on her. Species from every corner of the galaxy had come, each with its own history, its own fears, and its own hopes for the future. They looked to her not as a leader of one species, but as a representative of something greater. She took a deep breath and spoke, her voice clear and steady. "We stand together today not as separate powers, but as a unified galaxy. We've seen what happens when fear and division rule. We've felt the pain of fighting against each other, but we've also seen what happens when we come together." Mara paused, letting her words sink in. The faces before her were a mixture of hope and skepticism, but none dared to look away. "I stand here not as a representative of Earth, but as a representative of the future we want to build, one of peace, cooperation, and shared strength." She raised her hand, signaling the start of a new era. "We cannot change the past, but together we can shape the future. We must learn from our mistakes, work together to protect our people, and build a galaxy that is stronger for our differences." There was a long silence before the first applause, hesitant at first, then growing louder and stronger. The galaxy had never known anything like this before. It was a new beginning, not just for Earth, but for all species. Elsewhere in the deepest reaches of the galaxy, a quiet conversation was taking place. It was a secret meeting of the Cathari, Zarkin, and Threx leaders who had once ruled the Council. They had retreated from the galactic stage, but their eyes remained on Earth, watching as humanity reshaped everything they had worked for. "They'll never be able to keep this up," said Lord Cathar, his eyes narrowing. "The Earthborns have no true allies. Their unity will crack under pressure. The galaxy will turn on them." Admiral Krell of the Threx Dominion scoffed. "Perhaps, but they've shown us something we never expected. They are relentless. Their resolve is unlike anything we've faced." "What do we do now?" the Zarkin leader asked. His voice was filled with uncertainty. "Do we oppose them? Do we try to take back what we've lost?" Cathar shook his head. "No, we wait and we watch. Humanity is young. They will make mistakes just like the Council did. But for now, we must accept what has happened. They have the galaxy's ear. It's too late for us to do anything now." The others nodded, and the leaders fell into silence. The galaxy was no longer the same. Humanity had claimed its place in the stars, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Back on Earth, life slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The Earthborns weren't just rebuilding their cities. They were rebuilding the very fabric of their society. The scars of war, though still fresh, were reminders of what had been achieved and what was yet to come. Commander Elias Gray, who had once led humanity's forces through the heart of battle, stood on Earth's new flagship, the Horizon, watching as the ships of the new coalition prepared to leave orbit. They were no longer the unknown species, the ones others feared. They were now the leaders of something much greater. "There's a lot of work ahead," Ria said, standing beside him. "But we've made it. We've shown the galaxy that humanity isn't just a survivor." Elias nodded, looking out at the stars, his eyes filled with quiet pride. "We've shown them we're here to stay, and we're not just here to take, we're here to give." The future of the galaxy was uncertain. Old powers still simmered in the background, waiting for their moment to strike. But humanity had proven that they would not be intimidated. They had faced the galaxy's greatest powers and emerged victorious. Mara Liu's voice echoed across the stars as she spoke once more to the galaxy, her message clear and resolute. "This galaxy is ours to shape, but we will shape it together as equals." The future was now, and Earthborns were no longer just a species on the fringe. They were a force to be reckoned with, a new power in the galaxy standing tall among the stars. And as the horizon left Earth's orbit, heading into the unknown, humanity was ready to take its place as leaders of a new era. An era built on unity, strength, and the unwavering belief that no one would ever again silence their voice. This was just the beginning.